Hey Banditos, it's Wednesday, and you know what that means. Another episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits is coming right at you. Whereas always, we fling open those doors of your local comic book shop. Mike and Oren don't, but I do. And we talk to your favorite comic book creators of yesterday and today. And as always, let's get to the intros first. I'm Joe Marcello.
I'm Mike Farah.
Today is no different, folks. We're bringing you an absolutely amazing interview. If I had to sum up this interview in 2 words, it would be interesting and jealousy, because Mike had the opportunity to interview Judd Winick. I'm so flustered, I can't even get the words out. We've talked to Ron Mars, we've talked to Jeff Johns, and I've gushed about how much I love their work on Green Lantern. Well, Judd Winick is another one of those contributors to Green Lantern who just did amazing work. Probably, elevated Green Lantern back to just absolute prominence as it pertains to his level in the Justice League and DC in general. And it was just fantastic. And I couldn't be a part of it. So unfortunately, I'm a little green with envy.
Waka waka, green with envy. I love it, Joe. This was, just a great opportunity, a great conversation to have with Judd, someone I've always looked up to and respected, since his early days, coming off of the real world and his first graphic novel, Pedro Me, and his activism, and also, just sheer creativity. And, Joe, you mentioned Green Lantern, Green Arrow is another one. Did a lot with Batman, and now he's knocking it out of the park year after year with his Hilo series of kids graphic novels, and we get into all of it. So let's not wait any longer. This is Judd Winick. Judd, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, sir. It is very good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, we appreciate your taking the time. We're going to start the way we start with every guest we have, which is, how did you first discover comics?
Oh gosh, I have been reading comics since as long as I can remember. I had to say it probably all started with my dad. My dad, who is 78 right now, so he was an avid comic reader when he was a kid. His favorite being Captain Marvel. For those younger listeners and viewers, I mean Shazam, Captain Marvel.
Yes.
And back in the day when Captain Marvel was selling as much as Superman. So my dad loved comics. I loved cartoons. I loved comic strips, and comics just showed up, and he would get them for me. At first, it was just, honestly, I think he just grabbed stuff off the spinner rack that he thought would be cool and that he sort of liked. A lot of Superman, but somewhere in the mix, I'd say he accidentally grabbed some X-Men when I was little. So I'm 53. So I would say I saw Byrne Claremont X-Men was as many folks around my age are. Huge influence on me, and it was among some of the first comics I read. So when I was a wee lad.
Oh yes. Do you happen to have any of those original comics your dad brought home still in your collection? Or are they gone to the wind?
No, some of them I still have. Oddly, two things. One, for whatever reason, I grabbed a bunch and took them with me when I was a quasi-grown person and moved out. 23, 24 years old. Because I do have them. I have a bunch. I didn't buy them again. A bunch were flat out destroyed. My parents didn't throw them out. They did not. They were stored in the attic, and they had a rat infestation that destroyed most of my Mad magazines and a ton of my comics. But a lot of the key ones I have. So a lot of the X-Men, a lot of early Superman from the 70s I loved. And then, honestly, so you got to remember, so early days for comics. Like I grew up in the era, I'm old enough, that before there were comic stores where you just, went to your pharmacy, your drugstore, your supermarket, and had a spinner rack.
Right.
So I was saving them and putting them away, and took those dumbass boxes with me, all the stuff I had from the 70s and 80s, and then well through the 90s when then I was on my own. So I have a lot. Long answer for a very short question of like, yes, I still have most of them. Not
No,
most, I have a lot.
that's great. We like to hear all the stories behind keeping or discarding, and I'm definitely going to put rat infestation. Check that off our bingo card because we've not heard that one before.
I grew up with my parents when they told me that like a whole bunch of rats ate all your old magazines and comics. Like, come on. It's like, no, swear to God. And you can look it up. Rats apparently they eat everything and they use it for nesting, and it was all just shredded. I said, the comic books, really? Because it sounded like one of those bullshit stories. Which,
Right.
well, it wasn't a BS story for as we know, all comic book fans and historians know that a whole crap ton of really good comics got destroyed in the 40s because a lot of young men went off to war, and a lot of their moms went and threw away their comic book collections because you're a grown person now. So a lot of very big and important comics got destroyed. Mine, it was rats.
And baseball cards too usually get thrown out.
Yeah, baseball cards get thrown out for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I read that you were in my neck of the woods. I'm up here in Boston at some point after college graduation, living with somebody named Brad Metzer, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know if I got that right. But
Yes.
What are some memories from that time period, if I can take you in the Wayback Machine? You were developing your college comic strip, Nuts and Bolts, right? Trying to figure that out for syndication. What are your memories of that time period and trying to sort of break into, the professional cartoonist?
Job? To set the scene for those at home. Brad Meltzer and I were college roommates and best friends. And Brad, post-graduation, got a job at Games Magazine selling advertising. And I had a development deal with Universal Press Syndicate to turn my college comic strip into a professional comic strip. And we were living in a shithole apartment in Beacon Hill in Boston. So we were in a crappy apartment building tucked between two like multi-million-dollar brownstones. And it was an interesting and rough year. One, it was the coldest winter in Boston to date. Like, it was the coldest winter they ever had. And Brad and I had just left Michigan, which was pretty goddamn cold. So the expectation of moving someplace else that was even colder, that was rough. But Boston's the best, it's and we were living, kind of bohemian. We didn't have any money. We lived in a crappy apartment. Brad was working this job while working on his first novel at night. We lived in a tiny apartment that Brad's office was a closet, literally. That's where he'd do his writing. My office, where my drafting table was like this space next to the bathroom. Between the bathroom and the kitchen, there was a space, which I don't know what it was supposed to be for because it was too small to be an actual room, but I could fit my table in there. So I was drawing there. Brad was writing there at night when he wasn't working, and just started out. And then we lasted 1 year, and then it all went different. Brad decided after a year at Games Magazine that he decided to go to law school. So he went to Columbia Law, where his girlfriend and later fiance and now wife, Corey, was going to school. So, I mean, he's real dope. So I'm like, well, I guess I'll just go to Columbia Law School. So that was Brad's
backup
choice.
plans.
Yeah, no, my backup plan was I lost my development deal with Universal Press Syndicate. 9 months into my 1 year of development, they said, yeah, not really working for us. And we don't think it's up to the current professional standards of syndicated comic strips. And they dropped me from my development deal. So I had to move back in with my mom and dad back on Long Island. That was my lack of a backup plan. And you could have, if you would have killed me, it would have been easier because my entire life's plan had been working out up to that point. I went to a big university and I studied art at the University of Michigan. I did my college comic strip 5 days a week for 4 years, just like my heroes, Burke Breathitt of Bloom County and Gary Trudeau of Doonesbury. And I was going to get syndicated right out of graduation, just like they did. It was great, all coming together. And then it wasn't. And that was our year in Boston. Highlights being having no other major responsibilities except surviving and getting to go to Newbury Comics every week. More than every week.
Silver linings.
Newbury's the best. Best.
Yeah, there's still a number of those outlets around. Those in New England Comics out here in the suburbs, they have a few outlets as well, and those are pretty good.
Yeah, I think New England was we were a hop skip from Harvard Square.
Yeah.
So is Newbury still in Harvard Square? They still have the one. It was in the garage.
That's a good question. I actually haven't been to Harvard Square in a while. So it's possible that it still is. I know the flagship one on Newbury. Okay. And then there's one out here. I'm just south of Boston. What is it called? Norwood. Okay. Which is kind of in a strip mall. It doesn't have as much of the magic as the city outlets. But
no.
So somehow something's lost in translation, but it's still called Newbury Comics, and it has that new comic smell. So you get something for it.
Excellent.
So then you move back into your parents, but eventually you are into a little something called the real world. And I don't want to dwell on this too much because there wasn't necessarily. Well, at one point it was sort of a jumping off point in terms of your comics career, but at another point it was something completely different. But I wonder, you wanted to come on, presumably to get some sort of exposure. Was there any, and you were young, was there any thought in your head about sort of the exposure that comics and cartooning might get from you being one of the sort of cast members on this show, or was that not in your head?
Oh no, it was entirely my hope, like sort of an adjacent hope. I mean, I still wanted to be a cartoonist who did a syndicated comic strip. I wanted to do a daily comic strip, be syndicated, run in newspapers. That's what I wanted. Lost my development deal, moved in with my mom and dad, and suddenly it became starting like not half a joke, but like I saw a commercial for, Real World. You want to be on Real World 3 San Francisco? Send us a letter and a photo telling us why. I'm watching the second season and there's an ad. It's like, sure. And then my life kind of went on hold because they didn't even call it the audition process. It was just, the selection process or whatever the hell it was. But they had levels, which is like you send, you write a letter and tell them like, hey, this is why I want to do it. They say, great, here's an application. It's a 15-page application, and do a video of your friends interviewing you and be as creative as you like. And then after that, you make another level where they interview you on the phone. There's another level where someone follows you around with cameras for a day. And this goes on for 6 months. Now, by the way, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life at this point. I'm living with my mom and dad. It's like, and I kept like, yeah, I mean, I might move to LA to like, I don't know, try to do some animation stuff or get on the real world. I don't know. I'm still waiting for them to say no. And it's like, okay, that's over with. Let me move on. And it took like 6 months. So part of it was I had literally nothing else going on. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life at this point. I still want to be syndicated. So I'll try out for this goddamn show. At worst, I'll get to be on television and it'll be cool. At best, I'll get to be on television. It'll be cool. Maybe someone will see my work. How bad can that be? I was confident enough, like, if somebody sees my stuff, maybe someone says, hey, I like to check that out. And I will say, and like jumping 10 steps ahead, the director of our show, one of our two directors, George Ashore and Bob Fisher, George took me aside when we were just finishing up. We'd finished filming, and he'd actually explained to me, it's been 30 years, I still remember. It's like, listen, this will open doors for you, but you're going to have to be able to walk through them. And that held true lockstep, that I got to take many a dumb meeting and got to talk to people. And in some cases, nothing came of it. And they didn't really, they didn't really care or weren't that interested. But at the same time, a lot of times there was folks, and that's eventually what happened, like down the road, folks who like, I just had a leg up because they knew me from a television show and we could have a conversation. Mm-hmm. And when I had a conversation with someone, it's like, he seems nice enough. Okay, I'll look at your stuff. That's kind of how it went. And that little leg up of being on a television show was useful that way. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect anything that happened on the show to happen. it wasn't, it became much more meaningful. It became a much greater dramatic turn in my life in every way possible. From for those playing at home, fellow cast member on the show is a young woman named Pam Ling, who would become my girlfriend, then my fiance, and now my wife. And we have a home and 2 children in San Francisco. I didn't think that was going to happen when I did this dumb TV show. And I didn't think I'd meet someone like Pedro Zamora, who also affected my life in so many ways as well. It was an amazing and horrible experience. Again, folks playing at home, Pedro Zamora was a 22-year-old AIDS educator and activist. And in 1994, was just about the first person that most people in America or around the world had actually seen living with AIDS. Prior to this, it would just been people on the news, things like that, but actually seeing someone who's living with AIDS in a real way. And it was a seismic shift. It literally changed. It changed the world in a lot of ways, changed how an entire community was being viewed. And it changed my life, and later changed my trajectory as a storyteller as well. That happened also because of Pedro.
I'd love to talk about that a little bit, because you eventually, and I want to believe chronologically, and you can tell me that it's the Pedro and Me graphic novel came out 7 years after filming? Is that correct?
Yeah. 2001. Yeah.
But when did you come out of the experience of filming the real world and getting to know Pedro and this issue of AIDS? Did you come out of it thinking like, well, I have a talent, I have, I'm a cartoonist, this is what I do, this is what I want to do with my life, that can I apply this to this story and continue sort of the legacy of Pedro? Like, when did that thought come into your head?
It was kind of glacial. It happened slowly and organically and kind of honestly. After the show, Pedro got sick. Pedro was supposed to go on kind of a national tour where he was going to go and lecture around the country at colleges and high schools and whatnot. And when he got sick, he had like a dozen or so dates coming up. And this is very early days. And he couldn't make the dates. And he proposed that, like, listen, rather than cancel on all the schools, he asked me, like, would you sub in? Like, a bunch of them are going to cancel because you're not me. But some might say, okay. And he said he felt bad about not, keeping the dates somehow. So it began with me just subbing in for him and going and talking about him. And he told me what I should talk about and how I should talk about it. And that was the beginning. And then Pam started lecturing too. And then Pedro got very sick, and he passed away in November of '94, just a few months after we finished the show. And after he passed away, it didn't really seem like a good reason to stop talking about him. Quite the opposite. Now that he's gone, we should keep going. And I kept lecturing. I kept going around the country and lecturing. Pam did it for a little while longer and then had to go back to medical school because that's what she was doing. She was studying to become a doctor. And I on and off lectured for about about 2 years total, until it just got so hard emotionally to keep going and talking about it and reliving it and going over the experience again. And at no point did it ever lose meaning. It got harder and harder to do. So I stopped. And in the interim, not long after I stopped, I got a syndicated comic strip finally. So Creator Syndicate called me, which was fun. I'd already sent out my work to a bunch of other syndicates. I was going to redo my comic strip and send it back out again. But before that happened, Creator Syndicate called me with, we saw you on that television show. Or would you be interested in, do you have a syndicated comic strip? Like, fuck yeah. It's like, and the easy thing was like, yes, I have my submission pack ready to go. I can send it to you in a day. Here are my 4 weeks of, as you do, your 4 weeks of dailies, your 4 weeks of Sunday strips, and they go look at it. And sure enough, Creator Syndicate is great. And I got syndicated. It was terrific. And I launched into about 10 papers. I think it grew to about 20 papers at most. And that went on for a couple of years. And while I was doing the syndicated comic strip, which was, again, dream come true, I had this itch that I still wanted to keep telling Pedro's story somehow.
Mhm.
And at first I thought of introducing a character like him into my comic strip, that there be an uncle who comes out as gay and maybe he tests positive, and sort of kind of deal with his story through there. And as I was thinking about it, I like did a little sketch of a character I thought would be like the Pedro character. And I think when I drew him for the first time, something clicked that I don't really want to put him in a comic strip. It just didn't feel quite right. It felt like I was doing a disservice. Um, and it isn't knocking comic strips. It's just it fictionalizing him didn't quite feel right.
Right.
So that's when I sort of set out on maybe I can try to do a graphic novel, which I'd never done before. And I was mostly plus minus. I mean, I was mostly a superhero guy who I read Love and Rockets, and I'd love a lot of Dan Clowes. I mean, some of the black and white indie stuff,
Sure.
which and Kyle Baker, Why I Hate Saturn was one of my favorite books. It still is. So my style of art didn't necessarily translate, I thought, to doing a graphic novel. My stuff is too cartoony, but I started working on it. And at first it was kind of Wind in the Willows. That was sort of like a spot illustration with a ton of text from the lecture. I was basically taking my lecture and trying to illustrate it. And slowly but surely, it became more sequential art. And it took like 2.5 years, starting and stopping. Well, not starting and stopping, just doing it over and over and over again. Here's the book. Let me go back. And what happened was I kept doing more art. I kept drawing more scenes. And scenes I was talking about suddenly got expanded to, before you knew it, like, it's a comic book. And finally, when I was done, like, there you go. It's a 250-page comic book. It's a graphic novel. And this is the late 90s. So this sort of thing is when comics were still, a subculture.
Right.
If they were in a bookstore, they were all thrown into, and they still are in some bookstores, they're all thrown into one shelf. Right. Graphic novels, there's Watchmen right alongside, the Batman comics right alongside, Love and Rockets right alongside Stuck Rubber Baby. They're all just all over there.
Yeah.
Nothing for kids at all at this point. And with that, to circle back, so I wanted to do comic strips my whole life. I went and did this silly show. I met Pam, I met Pedro. We lost Pedro, and I wanted to tell a story. And that is how I did my first graphic novel. And when I was done with it, I think even before I got a publishing deal, I think I decided I didn't want to do the comic strip anymore. I realized that, this is how I want to tell stories. This is actually, I think, who I'm supposed to be. So I owe that also. I also owe that to Pedro. I don't think I would have ever gotten there.
That's interesting. So the format change, the change from comic strips to comic books, or sequential storytelling, came as a result of you working on Pedro and Me, and obviously the material is very personal to you, but enjoying the format of that kind of storytelling, and therefore wanting to do more of it.
Yeah, and learning that, the little skills I had as doing a comic strip, which is, the art of it is like folks talking down here, word balloons up here. That's how I draw. That's what I know. And taking it from there to, well, if I forgive myself for not being able to draw as well as Matt Wagner or John Byrne or whatnot, which I didn't, which I still don't, if I accept the fact, like, I'm a cartoony cartoonist, but you know what? A lot of the indie guys, they draw better than me, but there's still a quality to them. It's like stylized. I'll try to do that. And it was learning by doing. It's the advice I give to all young storytellers, whether they're cartoonists or not. Like, you just have to go do it. You can take classes, you can read books, you can watch videos, you can do whatever you want, but you have to go start making things. And a good piece of advice I got from Matt Wagner, which he passes along, is that the first 100 pages you're going to do are going to be awful. Just really bad 100 for those first 100, terrible. When you get to 101, it's going to be okay. You're going to get your first pretty good page out, but you got to get through those 100 bad ones. And this is before I met him. And when I did, it's like, yeah, no, I did like so many. And Matt Wagner, who's a friend, Matt Wagner is one of the first people who read it back in the day. You know, I got through hundreds of pages before I got pretty good at it. And it wound up being just, you know, people talking with word balloons over their heads. And I realized I didn't have to draw like a superhero comic. I could just draw like me.
Makes sense. And how does because around the same time you were doing the strip, you were developing Pedro Me, not sure what it would be, and you know the story grew in the telling, as they say. But you also had some success in the comic book format with Barry Ween. Was that kind of a formative process and project where you were able to finally come out and say, okay, I have this cartoonist angle or approach, but I can apply it towards this sequential comic book storytelling?
Yeah, this is my second big swing at doing it. Because I'd finished Pedro Me. I think I started toying around with it when I was pretty much done inking Pedro, and I started thinking about what I wanted to do next. And what I wanted to do next was nothing like what this was, doing a book about Pedro. I didn't want to do a memoir. I didn't want to draw realistically at all. And I just want to take the brakes off and do something stupid and fun just for me. And what it came down to is like, you know, like a dirty Calvin and Hobbesy sort of thing. Like I like cussing and, you know, and I didn't care or know if this was gonna get published. Not unlike Pedro Me. I just went ahead and did it. You know, and it's the benefit of youth that you get to like, I don't have many responsibilities. I just need to survive and do this. And so I just did it. So I just started doing, you know, I think I had 3 Barry Ween comics under my belt before I even reached out to anybody to figure out what the hell to do with it. Brian Bendis was one of the people I reached out to when, you know, and this is for those playing at home, this is long before Brian was Brian Michael Bendis, superhero god. This was before Spider-Man. This was, you know, I just kind of knew him a little bit through people, and I just reached out to him. And was like, hey, what do you guys do with this? And he said, like, go through Image. Like, and this is like early days with Image publishing work on on consignment, which is what they would do. It's like, listen, we'll pay for the printing. We'll make our money back, and we'll split it 50-50 with you. You keep all your rights, you do all your stuff. And it started with Image, and then from Image, I went over to Oni Press, who were going to do, you know, going to put it out there and do a little more marketing. But for me, creatively, it was just, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do anything I want. And it was incredibly liberating because it was just supposed to be stupid and profane and goofy. And what I found accidentally was that suddenly a little bit of heart and drama got into the story that I didn't really expect. You know, like, and it was learning by doing. It's like, you know what, this is, you know, I actually kind of care about these characters, and I can do things with these characters. I can put a little bit of empathy and pathos in there. And it wasn't even something that I was very thoughtful about. I was just kind of going with the flow. And it's fun. I'm smiling because early days when you don't know what you're doing and things really click, it's the greatest feeling. I mean, I still have that feeling today, you know. I've been working on my next book, and it's been really bad the last couple of weeks. And this past week or so, things have sort of started to click, and it's such a nice feeling.
Yeah.
When you're trying to make something and you like it because you are your first audience. You're the first one who's going to see it, and if you go like, oh no, I like that. I'm kind of proud of what I'm doing there. And I guess that was happening with Barry, which was like, I'm cracking myself up. And okay, not just me. I wrote it and drew it, and I handed it over to Pam, my girlfriend at the time, now wife, and she just effing loved it. She just thought it was so funny, and really like, this is very you, and I like it, and I like the relationship with the boys. There was things about it that sort of, it was just nice. I mean, it's one thing when you it's one thing as a storyteller when you do work and you're proud of it, but it's another thing when you hand it over to the person whose opinion you value the most and they dig it too.
Yeah.
Doesn't always happen for everybody. It does. Some people are not in those relationships. I happen to have a wife who is as geeky, well, not as geeky. Like if I'm 100% geek, she's like 60, 65. Loves Star Wars, love it, has read Sandman, reads a lot of the comics that I give her. But, we're going to the opening weekend of the Marvel movies because of me. Not, she could probably wait a couple of weeks and be fine.
But she's going.
Oh,
that's what counts.
No,
yeah.
Going in there. We talk about it. Excited. I mean, this morning she was running late. Had to take one of our kids to school. Was running late. Pissed as shit. And I'm there saying, "Hey, tickets to Flash just went on sale. Do you have anything going on like Saturday? I think whatever it is, the 17th. And do you want to go like midday? You want to go at night? Hang on. She's pissed, but she's still looking at her calendar. It's like, okay, no, I'm fine. It's like, so midday or like, I don't care, but I'm fine. Let's go ahead. It wasn't like, I don't have time for this shit.
Yeah.
No. Engaged. We're doing this. We're all going because she kind of wanted to see the Flash movie too. So there
you go. Nice.
Yeah. So Pam liked Barry Ween, and that was very important.
Well, yeah, I can imagine that's very important for a creator, and living in a household with somebody right next to you, right on top of you. I mean, hopefully they like your work, and that must have been a big encouragement, I think, for you.
Oh, it was, introduced the first of what would be many times where I introduced characters in the story, which are kind of based on Pam.
There you go. I mean, right? What?
Yeah.
So then, or actually, I'd like to know about how this came about. So you have Pedro Me, you have several volumes of Barry Ween, excuse me,
mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, or maybe not all of a sudden, you tell me, you're working at DC as a writer for. First for Green Lantern, then for Green Arrow and other things we'll talk about. But how did that transition sort of come about?
The Real World and Bob Schreck. So most of the professional success I have in my life, this house I live in, the life I have, I owe to Bob Schreck. And I can't say it enough, and I will say it as often as I possibly can. So Bob Schreck, for those who play at home, Bob Schreck was an editor at Dark Horse Comics. He was Frank Miller's editor for a number of years, along with Diana Schutz. And then later he went to, he founded Oni Press, and then left Oni Press to go to DC Comics. Now, I met Bob Schreck, I think in 1995, maybe 96. I think it's 95. I went to the San Diego Comic-Con. This is when the San Diego Comic-Con was still small-ish. It was still gigantic. It was still the biggest thing in the world, but it wasn't the biggest thing in the whole world. And at the at Comic-Con was Kevin Smith, who was introducing two things. One, he had a script book of Clerks and Chasing Amy that you could get, as well as his first Clerks comic that was being done through Oni Press. And he was there signing his brand new comic for Oni Press with a substantial line, but nothing like what happens now, meaning that I waited online for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, along with the 85 other people and blah, blah, blah. Now, what I was hoping, which was happening at the time, is that this is after the Real World. And now and again, I could have meaningful conversations with people that I admired, because I'd say hi and they'd go, "Where have we met before?" And I was like, no, I was on this television show. I was like, "Oh shit, you're on the Real World. Hey, how are you?" And I can have some kind of meaningful exchange. Nothing usually comes out of it, but just like, "Hey, how are you?" So I did that with Kevin, in the sense that, I had him sign the book and the comic, and no recognition whatsoever. And then he said, "Who should I sign it to?" It's like, to Judd and Pam. Nothing. Signed it, handed it back to me. Incredibly pleasant, fine. And now, while this is going on, one table over is Bob Schreck, who is Kevin's editor for his Clerks comics at Oni Press, the imprint that he founded. And Bob is giving me the look. He's giving me and I give him the up nod. I finished talking to Kevin. I walk over and said, "Hey, how are you? I'm Judd." He goes, you're Judd Winick. It's like, yes. Like, oh, what? He's like, how are you? And we started talking, and he had the same 20 questions everybody does about the show. You know, he wanted to talk about Pedro Zamora a bit, and like we had a deeply meaningful conversation. And then he said, "Listen, I'm grabbing lunch in like 10 minutes. You want lunch?" Like, yeah. It's like, okay, meet me back here in like 10 minutes. We'll grab some lunch. So Bob Schreck and I had lunch, talked about many things. I had copies of my comic strips. He looked at it, and then even went so far as like, listen, if you ever wanted to do any kind of stories that weren't like you know, it's like, you know, we could do a comic strip, I guess, in like Oni double feature does this one pager. Would you do a one pager for us with your characters? Like, sure. So that was my first job in comics, was a one pager for Oni double feature. And I did that. And not long after that, I had a draft of Pedro Me. I gave it to Bob to read, this is Bob Schreck, Frank Miller's editor at Dark Horse. He found his own. Would you read this? Not to publish. What do you think? So Bob read it, came back to me, said, okay, we will publish this for sure, but I think you should try to find a mainstream publisher. I want you to exhaust all possibilities to find a mainstream publisher. If it doesn't work out, then Oni Press will publish this graphic novel. I will do this. We will do this. 100 should be a book that goes into bookstores. He said, and we couldn't possibly give it the reach that it needs. It's like, okay. And so I got a literary agent. It made the rounds. Vertigo was interested in publishing it for DC Comics. Then she went with Henry Holt. But Bob and I then had this friendship. And Bob was like at every step in the way. It's like, oh, I got a literary agent. Like, great. Send it out. Like, who is it? Like, Henry Holt. Do you know them? Like, yeah, they publish books. I know that. Yeah, blah, blah. And so Bob was always my rabbi. And so after that, it was like, you know, after Pedro Me, he's like, you want to do anything else? You got another story? And I did a story that went into Oni double feature, like a two-parter, like my first 30-page story, that non-Pedro story. And then after that came Barry Ween, all at Oni Press. And then Bob left Oni Press, got a big job at DC Comics as an editor of superhero comics. And then he calls me like about almost a year into his tenure and asks, like, do you not like superhero comics? It's like, no, I love superhero comics. You're the only person in comics who hasn't called me for a job. So he said, and he goes, and I know you can actually, you know, you got some gig, because he read Pedro Me. This is before it even came out. So that was my calling card. And Bob said, okay, so Ron Mars is leaving Green Lantern. He doesn't want to leave until he gets to kind of pick who's going to take over the character he helped shape in every kind of way. He said, I brought your name up. I gave him a copy, my beat up photocopy version of Pedro Me, and he really liked it. And we started talking. So I did a couple of spec scripts. He took them to Carlin and Ron Mars. They liked it. And then it began as like, so you're going to be the fill-in guy on Green Lantern. And like I said, fill-in, like, yeah, basically, unless you fuck it up. And, you know, people don't like what you're doing. If Mike Carlin doesn't like what you're doing, if I don't like what you're doing, like, so let's just keep writing until that's that. And he sent me scripts and said, like this, and walked me through it and taught me how to write, you know, comics for, you know, in a superhero script form, which I'd never done before. But his attitude was like, you did set, okay, this is bygones. Bob's line to me was like, what you did your first time through was harder than doing a 25-page comic book script. He said, I feel comfortable that if I show you how to drive this car, you'll drive this car. The car you drove before was more difficult. So let's do this. And that's how it started. So real world Kevin Smith, Bob Schreck,
there you
Oni
go.
Press, DC
That's
Comics. And it was all, I tried to explain it in the way, like, it all just kind of happened a little bit organically. One thing just kind of led to another. A lot having to do with Bob and his faith in me. And again, this room with all my stupid toys behind me, this whole thing, it's cause of Bob. That's how it all started.
The house that Shrek built.
Indeed. No lie.
So I have a couple follow-up questions. One,
sure.
When you heard from Bob that, you know, he's here at DC, he wants you to come write for him, and the project that he mentions is Green Lantern. Are you excited? Are you in the back of your head being like, I wish it were Batman, Wonder Woman, whoever else you may have thought of? What was your reaction to the character being offered to you?
I was very excited. Okay, for one, the advice I give to anybody about anything is when people make you an offer, say yes.
Take the job.
You know, just say yes. Just do it. Like, what if I'm bad at it? Then you'll get fired. But you know, you might not be bad at it. But if you don't do it, you'll never know. So I would often, you know, and this was a big yes. And it was Green Lantern, a character I liked and loved. At the time, he was probably considered a second tier character in a lot of ways, even though he was a first tier character. You know, it skipping around a little bit. I mean, it kind of cut both ways on me. It was very much to the readers, like, who the fucking guy from the real world, you know. So it's going to be hard. You know, I knew, like, you know, but Bob again said, like, the books will be great, so it'll be fine. But I'd say I was nervous, but at the same time, I had Bob saying, like, it's going to be fine. I've read, read a script. It was great. Had notes, this and that. And it was more, the excitement of doing it greatly outweighed any nervousness I had ever had about doing it, because I had never worked with anyone before. You know, I had never, you know, I'd always done my own shit. And now suddenly I'm doing comic books, which is, you know, not art by committee, but you have a team. And, you know, and off it went. And then suddenly I'm getting pencils back. You know, it's like I came up with this crap in my head and someone drew it. Like, it's magic. It's crazy. And, you know, and then getting this thing, like introducing like Batman and Superman into the book. Like, you know, the first time you actually write, like, you know, and then Superman, and then you like write, you know, and putting words in Superman's mouth, you have a little heart attack. It's great. I was young enough and new enough that it was all exciting, that it got beyond how nervous I was going to be about if I flopped on my face. But it happened so slowly, and people were being very, very supportive, from Bob Schreck to Mike Carlin, that I felt pretty good, you know. And then the book started coming out, and the reactions were incredibly mixed, because, as Ron Mars told me, like, the most divisive title in DC Comics is Green Lantern. Like, oh, come on now. Like, no, you'll see. He's like, and warned me, it's like, it's going to get very, very ugly. And I said, oh, but, you know, like, I'm going to do a good job. He said, I think you're going to do a great job. And they're going to some folks are just going to want your head. And you just have to be ready for that. So my start in comics, this is before we even had the expression haters. This is before social media. We just had the DC message boards. You just had message boards back then. And when my books started coming out, when Green Lantern started coming out, it just, I mean, and by the way, I don't want to frame this like, you know, like the early days of the civil rights movement, and, you know, there I am at the coffee counters and put my time in, old man doing, like, you know. But from day one, I got all kinds of crap that we now call, you know, hater fanboy insanity. But along with the fact that, you know, people liked the books and it was interesting, and I loved doing it. That's probably more important than anything else. I was having so much fun. I'm writing comics, you know. It was a lot of fun, you know. And I kind of took to it because I always read superhero comics. I loved them so much. I never thought I'd have the opportunity to do this. And then realizing that, oh no, the big science fiction comic book nerd in me, like, I have the chops for this. I can actually do this. You know, I can make things up in this way. And I've said it a million times in the decades of doing this kind of stuff, that all superhero comics are now, it's all fan fiction, you know, including the folks of us who do it. You know,
Sure.
We're taking characters that are 50, 60, 70 years old, and we get to write our stories, except we get paid and it gets published. But that's all it is. It's like we get to tell our version, and it was great. So it was, I think I was more excited about doing it and had the support of the folks to feel that daunted. And then the book came out, and like, there was a lot of crap, but at the same time, internally at DC Comics, it was like, yeah, you know, what are you gonna do? It's like, you know, they actually don't pay attention to it. They did not pay attention to the hate mail, hate boarding, how I was the worst writer ever to come in comics, and he's only got this because he was on a television show, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, or whatever crap it was. It didn't matter, because it was fun, and that's how it started. It was a good time.
Yeah. And I think I would imagine those haters, those trolls, whoever, they probably came around at some point, you know. I would imagine, as they look back on and certainly as we do, look back on, your run on Green Lantern. I mean, I don't know how they, other than the usual comic book complaining, which I think just happens, and I think that's probably why DC had that stance. They're like, everything's fine, because it just happens all the time. But I think you look back on it, it's what a premier run on something for someone who hasn't written superhero comics before. Anyway, you already anticipated my other follow-up question, but I want to dig just a little bit deeper, which was moving now from, you had done your own work up until this point, your own work being writing and illustrating. And now you're in a position where you are writing and trusting, that someone is going to, in a visual sense, execute your vision from what you've written. Was that something that was kind of daunting? And did you have to get used to that when you first saw pages like, I wouldn't have drawn it this way, or anything like that? Or did you just kind of jump in with both feet and you're like, this is cool, I love it, I'm just going to go with what's going on?
Speaking positively first, because it was mostly that. Again, I was taught well. Bob Schreck from early days explained to me that writing a script for a comic book, you're writing a letter to your artist, particularly your penciler. Write directly to them. He said, talk to them. That's the one who's going to be creating and telling your story. So put all the words on the page you think that will help get the idea out of your head onto the page. And that was how I started, and that was remarkably good advice, which for years later, I understand that not everyone gets good advice like that. Because any kind of example. If you're writing a panel where it's like, you know what I'm looking for? I'm looking for that, that shot in Platoon, Willem Dafoe, he throws his arms back. It's the one on the poster. He throws his arm back, but he's getting shot to shit. Like, I'm looking for something like that. It doesn't have to be actually that pose, but this is the feeling we're coming for. Like, he's already half dead and they get him from behind. And it's like, we want all the drama of like that. And you describe that for one panel, and then you send that off to your artist, and then it comes back. It's like, oh yeah, that's it. That's how they interpreted what I was trying to say. And that's it. It wasn't like they didn't do a platoon shot. It wasn't like the one that's on the poster. It's something different, but they get the emotion of it because I'm trying to describe it. And sometimes you get anecdotal. It's like, okay, so right now, even though this is like it's in the middle of the night, his reaction is he's just been woken up from a dead sleep in the morning. And he just looks awful and or whatever. Like, I want to look like a cat just jumped on his back and he couldn't, things like, anything could throw out that would help him get there to translate it was there. And it isn't just and then he throws a punch, it throws another punch. A lot of times the action stuff, you come up short, and it depends on your artist who you're working with. But I would, and I would really script it out, panel to panel, beat for beat, because I draw. But it was usually mostly that's the magic. You put it on the page, which you're sending it out to them, and it comes back like, holy shit, look at that. Look at that. And I've been very, very fortunate that with a couple of minor exceptions I couldn't even think of if you put a gun to my head. I've worked with some really incredible people, a lot who were on their way up when I was working with them, and always made whatever I did better. It was never that they totally screwed up that story. There was probably an occasional fill-in which got derailed in the sense of it's in the middle of a story arc and suddenly the characters look vastly different from book 53 to book 56. We got to fill in over there, and that gets hard. Jeff Loeb always tells a funny story that sometimes changing in some cases he used to change artists mid-book. He said it's like you're watching a movie and there's George Clooney, and then the scene changes and suddenly it's Jim Carrey, and everybody's supposed to be okay with that. It's that's how we do this sometimes to make deadlines. It's yeah, there's that. But for the most part, it was about collaboration and learning how to do that. And it was always really, again, you throw it out there, it comes back, and holy shit, look how he drew Superman. That's great. Look at the acting. It was always the acting's great. Oh my God, look how they did that. It was always deeply interesting.
That's good to hear. Sometimes we hear that there's some apprehension in, especially those who have illustrated before, to sort of make the move completely to writing and then sort of let go of that sort of art critique that they have in the back of their mind. But yeah,
I think a lot of it has to do is that I don't draw like that. I mean, I think that was incredibly helpful. That every single person I have worked with who drew any superhero comic that I wrote draws better than me. So I mean, it's like I can draw it, but it's gonna look somewhere between like Calvin and Hobbes and the Peanuts. I could do it, it's just gonna be a whole different thing. So I think that but I learned a lot too. I mean, it's really interesting that you learn by doing, but also watching these brilliant artists like take what I did and how they're directors, producers, and the entire acting cast all rolled into one. They move the camera, they do this, and I might pick camera angles and shots and things like that, like medium shot, close up, wide shot. But at the same time, they're making so many choices and learning from how my artists I work with. That even calling them my artists, I feel weird because it's like it's their book as much as mine.
Yeah.
So the pencilers and inkers who we work with, show us a lot, so much by doing it. It's great. It's great. And they're all better than me, so it was easy in that way.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Green Arrow, which now hearing some of the backstory here, it almost seems like a natural progression on that book, right? Started with Kevin Smith, then went to your old roommate, Brad Metzer, and then to you, right? What did what were your thoughts coming onto that book, and where did you want to take it based on what had come before?
Well, it wound up being incredibly big shoes to fill. So Bob Schreck was the editor on Green Arrow. He's the one who brought Kevin Smith in. That was Bob's idea. It's like, he's going to be great at writing superhero comics. He's going to love it. It's going to be awesome. And he wrote Green Arrow. And then as Kevin's tenure was winding down, he said, okay, so listen, I want you at some point to take over Green Arrow, but it can't be now, because I think if we go from Kevin to you, they are gonna kill you in a way that they couldn't even think of killing you on Green Lantern. They killed you on Green Lantern all the time. He said the ocean of hate and criticism will be just too vast. He said, I think we need like a mystery meat in between. He said, like another outsider. And then he had read Brad Metzer's thrillers. Brad Metzer is a novelist. He writes law thrillers, and Bob had read them. It was the whole sort of synergy thing that like Bob knew me, checked out Brad's books. Brad's books were bestsellers. He also saw there was a lot of superhero references in there. And he asked me, like, would Brad be interested in writing Green Arrow? It's like, I think Brad's been waiting his entire life to write Green Arrow. And you should, I won't even say you should do that. Like, do it, just do it. It's like, he'll absolutely do it. And if you want to do it, like, done. He'll write Green Arrow. It'd be great. And so Bradley took over for Kevin Smith and had a glorious run. Again, made it very, very tough for me. And again, when he was finishing up, it was like, Bob said, okay, mystery meat done. Said, I think the transition from Brad to you will be great. And it was amazing. I didn't think I'd be on Green Arrow as long as I was, which was 5 years. When I picked my head up at one point, I honestly didn't even recall that I'd been doing it that long. It was just the thing I did. I always wrote Green Arrow, aside from picking up other books along the way and doing other stuff. I was stuck with Green Arrow. A lot of it I think had to do is I had a deep, deep love for the character. And I got to work with really terrific artists. Even when they left and new people came in, it was great. And also it was just continuing my working relationship with Bob Schreck, which I wanted to keep doing. We were just having a great time. And it was only there at the very, very, very end. It's like, I think I'm wrapping it up. I think, I was actually kind of done. And then Dan DiDio said, I want to relaunch the book with Green Arrow and Black Canary getting married, and then we launched it as a title of their own. Like, oh, okay, I can do more. Yeah, it's like yeah, it's like no, I'm totally excited again. I said I was sort of like not quite seeing the end of my tether, but sort of seeing where the end of the tether could be. It's like, yeah, this is getting a little bit harder, and I think maybe I should wrap up Green Arrow. And then he's like, but we should get him married. Like, oh, holy shit. Okay. You know, it's like, yeah, like thinking like, you know, maybe Cliff Chang will do the book. Like, yeah. And I worked with Cliff on this backup story we did in Batman called Josie Max. Like, let's do it with Cliff. So again, this is before Cliff exploded. But yeah, Green Arrow was great because I got to do so many different things with him. You know, we got to reinvent him a couple different ways. I got to work with different artists, got to tell these big stories, got to tell stories about not just Oliver Queen, but him and Black Canary, you know, and sort of create the Arrow family in a way that happened again, sort of organically in the storytelling. It was just nice. It was fun. It was a good run, you know, a lot of clunkers in there too, which I won't point out. Brian Bendis actually pointed out to me like a long time ago. Either we talked about it or I read in an interview, but he said like, your crappiest work is somebody's favorite. So don't ever put a flag in it like, oh yeah, no, the worst crap I ever did was, you know, my run on Daredevil. Pop. I mean, I'm saying me, not Bendis. It's like the worst stuff I ever did. And I was like, that was great. I love that. You hate that? Like, or worse, people agree with you. Like, oh yeah, no, you really shit the bed on that one. That was terrible. I don't know what you were doing, man.
Yeah, Green Arrow is such a pliable character, especially back then. I feel like even with, you know, Kevin Smith and Brad Meltzer's run under the belt, there were just so many opportunities, which I think you executed on to expand the sort of mythos. And, you know, I don't want to call him a blank canvas because he's not. He has a history and there's a lot of, you know, stuff there to build on. But being able to take that character and build it out is, you know, had to be a really kind of gratifying moment in your progression.
It was. I think, again, arguably, depends who you ask, you know, Green Arrow, sort of kind of second tier, you know, he's not Batman, he's not Superman, he's not Wonder Woman, he's not Flash, you know, and I think, since then, I mean, you know, they had a whole television show. So, and now he becomes part of popular culture in a way before. I mean, frankly, when I would go around and tell people I write superhero comics, oh, like what? Do you write Batman? It's like, no, I write a series, Green Arrow. Green Arrow, is that the guy with the ring? I was like, no, it's Green Lantern. I used to write that. I did. No, it's Green Arrow. Yeah, who is that? It's like he's got a bow and arrow, kind of like Robin Hood. Like, oh yeah, you know, faint recognition. You know, this is back in the day, so most people didn't know. Ed Brubaker and I used to joke about that. That like doing other books until you did Batman, it was sort of satisfying to do Batman. So you could just tell randos who don't know anything about anything. Like, what you write comic books? Anything what heard? Yes, I write Batman. Oh, that's great. I know Batman. Do you work on the movies? Like, no, I don't work on the movies. I write the comic
it's
book.
a next step.
Like,
it's always like you could be doing something more recognizable and better.
Yes, immediately.
That's funny.
So Green Arrow was Green Arrow was always kind of there in the middle. But again, with that, you know, it allowed me, you know, I could expand the character and have a lot of interesting and deep stories and fun stories. And, you know, he's still, I think he's kind of a feet on the ground character because he, you know, is highly trained, doesn't have superpowers. So he's limiting in that way, and it makes it an interesting character because he only can do so much. And, you know, and it's fun. It's fun in that way.
Also at DC, one of your, you know, larger, more impactful stories had to do with the resurrection of Jason Todd. And, you know, my question is pretty simple to start off with is why that and why then?
Well, it wasn't my idea in the way that okay. I've told the story before, and I apologize to anyone who might have heard me tell it before.
I apologize for asking.
I was reading. I was reading Batman. I was reading Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee's story arc, Hush. And in Hush, this mysterious character, Hush, who has bandages all around his head, and is the nemesis and villain of the story arc. and it's a bananas story arc. It's great. It's got everybody in it at some point. You know, every major character in the DCU is in there, and it's terrific. And this big mystery around who the character is, because also he seems to have a lot of background on Bruce Wayne. He sort of has this insight to, yeah, and it's great, and I'm loving it. And we get to this, not quite penultimate, but we get to this big sort of climactic moment where Hush and Batman are facing off in this graveyard, and Hush unmasks himself. He removes the bandages from his face, and he reveals himself that he is Jason Todd, who's been resurrected in the Lazarus Pit. And my heart just exploded in my chest. I thought this was great. I dug the shit out of it because as a fan and as a storyteller, I got it and saw it like 100 miles of broken road. I just saw it as an opera. Like, it's like, this is so great. Like, oh God, like, so Jason Todd, his greatest failure, the Robin who didn't work. I just saw the whole thing. The Robin who didn't work, the one who he couldn't control, the one who got away from him, the one who's deaf at the hands of Joker, his worst enemy, still haunts him. He keeps the costume in as a totem, as a memorial in the Batcave, still sitting there. It haunts him. And now he's back as a villain, taking everything that Batman taught him and using it against him. Like, oh God, it's gonna be great. And then in the next issue, we find out it's actually Clayface, and he was just disguised as Jason Todd, and they took it back. It's like, oh, okay, that's another way to go. But I was just so the hook was in me. So when it came, and by the way, so Bob Schreck is the editor of Batman at this point, and when it comes around, and Bob's like, you know, said like, okay, so I want you to do like a 6-issue fill-in on Batman, and then, you know, after that we're gonna, you know, slide in, you can take over Batman. It's like, so start thinking about it. And I came to him with my idea. It's like, yeah, I want to really bring back Jason Todd. He's like, don't do that. I said, no, come on, no, it'll be great. Just don't do that. And I said, no. I said, I had this idea. It's like, he said, it feels like a stunt. It feels a little bit cheap. And he said, like, they didn't even do it. They took it back. Like Jeff and Jim took it back. They didn't even do it. I said, I know, but I feel the story there. And to Bob's credit, he didn't like the idea. But to his credit is that he gave me the benefit of the doubt. He said, okay, go ahead. He didn't really want me to do it. He didn't like the first couple of scripts, in the sense that he gave me notes, we worked through it, but still didn't like the idea. And a couple of scripts in, he finally said, like, okay, I get it. And I was like, what do you mean you get it? He said, no, I'm in now. And I said, what changed your mind? He goes, I don't know. He said, the idea of it felt like a stunt, but now seeing the execution of it, he said, it's like, you're taking your time. It has a lot of heart. He said, it's deeply sad. He said, I guess I didn't expect it to be this sad. And he said, so you've turned me around. Which again, a lot of this has to do with not just as he was a friend, because he was. And even though we were friends, there's a lot of shit that he wouldn't let me do. And now and again, he kicked scripts back and said, this is not working. Like, really? It's like, yeah, you got to start over. You know, stuff for Green Lantern, Green Arrow. Like he was my editor. He was my boss. And now and again, things were working. In this case, he actually felt like the work was good, but he didn't like it, but recognized other people might, and was going to let it go and let it happen and edit the book. And eventually he's sort of like, no, I get it now. I see it now. It's like, it's working for me. Like, so, you know, so I blame Jim Lee and Jeff Loeb for putting the idea in my head. And then letting people know that Bob Schreck didn't want to do it either. Thought it was just going to be, you know, some crappy stunt. But I felt strong enough about it because, again, you know, it's like, no, I think we get to have our cake and eat it too. I think it still gets to haunt Batman in the way it had haunted him. But I think this is worse in a way. I think, like, you know, and Batman will always think that he came back broken. Like, you know, like, this isn't Jason. You know, you can hang on to that. And there's all these things that I felt like storytelling wise it worked. And it excited me then as it still excites me now.
I mean, I think it worked really well. I would have had, you know, had I been the editor, and probably even fans hearing, you know, seeing something about it in previews or catching on to the fact that it might happen, might be apprehensive as well. But I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I feel like this has happened, I feel like this has happened with other characters as well. I mean, it's comics. People are going to come back from the dead all the time.
Oh yeah.
And they've broken, or all these sacred cows are no longer sacred. But it's happened now with several characters, and particularly with Jason Todd, that I think if you treat it with respect and you make it part, it comes from character, I think, and you treat the characters that are involved with a lot of respect and, explore the psychology of what it means, then you have a story on your hands, and you have drama, and you have, all of these, possibilities that emanate from it. So, so I can see both sort of Bob's apprehension, but also, what you actually put out into the world was very much a, proof moment that this works, and it, he's still around, the character, and so there was something to it. And I think, I think you should be extremely proud of that moment. I think it was a great sort of master stroke that what he saw coming.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm very, very proud that the character's still around and kicking. I'm very, very proud of the, multiple versions of Red Hood Jason Todd that's popping around. It's one of those things where it's just a little bit in serendipity. You don't know exactly where the idea comes from and how it works out, but a number of things just clicked in the right way. Jason Todd coming back, deciding to call him Red Hood because it's something that just seemed obvious to me. It's like, yeah, no, he'll be Red Hood because that's how Joker started, and it's the biggest FU to both the Joker and Batman at the same time. Let's do that. And I think for me, what sold the idea to Dan DiDio, who was our chief editor at the time, and he was like, and Dan was a fan and liked what I was doing. Was happy I was doing Batman. Like, it was even like Bob didn't want me to bring back Jason Todd. Dan was all for it from the jump and wanted to know, like, what's the story. And I told him a bunch of stuff, and I told him the end of the arc, which was the emotional crux of the whole thing, which was what has broken Jason was not that Batman let him die, but that Joker is the one who killed him, and Batman has let him live. How could you do that? Even he's like, Jason understood, like, I understand you letting him live through all the people he's murdered and the graveyards he's filled, but then he took me from you, and that wasn't even enough. And I was having breakfast with Dan DiDio at the San Diego Comic-Con. He goes, like, that's how it ends. I said, yeah, no, with this confrontation between the three of them. It's like, oh, okay, just write that. If you end there, just write that. I said, so I'll be okay. It's like, it's gonna be better than okay. I was like, oh, okay, I feel pretty good about it. And Dan's like, no, you should feel good about that. It's like, okay. It's like, it was the first time I'd like sort of let this little like story animal out into the wild, and someone else saw it. And Dan going like, no, that's something special. That'd be cool. Like, oh, cool. I'm glad you like it too. I kind of like it. And I felt comfortable, like, whatever roller coaster we're gonna do, this is where we're gonna end. I think if people react the way that Dan did and later Bob did when we were talking about it, he was like, oh, that's heartbreaking. Like, isn't it? I think so, isn't it? He goes, yeah. Oh yeah. So sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes these things just fall into place. And I owe it to everybody along the line who, they came up with Jason Todd, who's the broken Robin, to Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee putting the idea in my head in the first place, to, I don't know, probably even the pushback I got from Bob was important, that it made me work a little bit harder.
Yeah.
Handing in those first couple of scripts and him like, it's like, yeah, motherfucker. Okay, let me, it's like, you gotta bring your A game. And it was fun. I'm glad I'm glad you dug it too, sir. I appreciate it.
Definitely. So as I said, wanted to move to Hilo. I just have two more quick questions in the superhero genre. And
absolutely.
That is one I like to ask, and we only went over a few of the highlights of your, vast career in DC and the superhero world, but I always like to ask, looking back, are there any stories that you feel like were overlooked in some way or that were underestimated, that you would point fans to that maybe have read all of your sort of major work, to sort of highlight for them?
Well, let's see. I mean, part of it is that, you know, it's all about me, so I only hear the me stuff anyway. So I never feel like it's underappreciated. I mean, I'd say a story. I mean, I would say I have to point people to it, but it's funny, over the last 5 years, people seem to have found it. One I'd always pointed people towards was a miniseries I did with Josh Middleton, which was called First Thunder, which was about the first meeting between Superman and Captain Marvel. Now we call him Shazam. This was a series that did just fine, and people dug it, but it was kind of under the radar for a while. But it's one of my favorite stories. It completely holds up. It's called First Thunder. And it was, we talked for like a minute about actually turning that one into an animated movie, which still breaks my heart a little bit, because I think it would have been great. But one of the studio folks actually said, like, I don't think there's enough story there. It's like, you're crazy. And a number of the folks who wanted to do it's like, yeah, for the ending alone, we got to do this. It's like, really, it's solid. And like, I think maybe just as a backup story. It's like a backup story. It's like, yeah, like an 11-minute story. Like, you want to do this whole thing in 11 minutes? Like, no. So First Thunder, I always recommend that one. That's always a blast. For the Marvel fans, I mean, plenty of people talk about it, so I don't feel like it's underappreciated. My Exiles run. Exiles, which for those who don't know, it's like X-Men meets Sliders, you know, or Quantum Leap. And that was very early days. I'd been writing Green Lantern for about a hot minute, and then Marvel called, and I had to go to Bob and said, Bob, Marvel Comics wants me to write a book. Is that okay? He said, I don't hear anyone here telling you, like, giving you 5 other books to write. If you had 5 other books to write and you were so busy, no, go ahead and do that. Like, that's how great Bob was. Like, I said, Marvel wants me to write a book. And Bob said, go fucking write a Marvel book. Like, let someone here tell you can't. Like, that's not my place. It's like, yeah, go ahead. So Exiles was a lot of fun because I was doing What If with a team. It was great. That was fun.
Well, that gets into my next question, which was about Marvel, and you referenced that you did the Exiles book and maybe a few other things, but I haven't worked a lot with Marvel,
No.
probably primarily due to your relationship with Bob, who's been at DC. But is that, do you have an affinity for the Marvel world, the Marvel characters, and if you were given the opportunity?
Oh, yes. The very short answer. I was writing Green Lantern. I was writing Exile simultaneously. Dan DiDio comes to DC Comics. Dan became a fast fan of my work, thankfully, really enjoyed it. We became fast friends as well. We like a lot of the same stuff. And Dan is the one who created the exclusive contract, which would later take over comics. And he tapped me and Jeff Johns as the first 2 people who will be brought in exclusively to DC, which meant I had to leave my one Marvel book that I was doing was Exiles. And I even asked Dan, like for one, he said, like, I had a special dispensation for Barry Ween. I could do that. That's no problem. And sort of any other ancillary stuff, he couldn't care. But I said, can I keep writing Exiles? Like, no, that would be a book for Marvel. That would mean you're not exclusive. Like, I just want to do Exiles. Like, no. So with that, I was exclusive pretty much for another 10 years, I think. I think only my exclusive contract might have just lapsed a couple of years towards the end there. So I couldn't go back to Marvel because I was exclusively under DC Comics. I was writing superhero comics. And, that's how that happened. I think, I've written a ton of superhero comics. I've not written a ton of stuff in Marvel. I think some of my superhero jonesing to do superhero comics might have left my body already. But these are characters that I know and love. And probably because I wasn't I didn't do any of the sausage making of Marvel characters. That I think my head and heart as a fanboy might still be there more so than a lot of the DC comics. Like I worked at DC. I did these for 12 years. I wrote these superhero comics. So a little bit of the gleam and magic is kind of gone because I worked there. You know, I was in the trenches, and so when I read a Batman comic, you know, I'm like Joe Pantoliano in The Matrix, where everyone else sees the numbers and the ones and twos and ones and zeros. He sees a blonde, a brunette, and whatnot. When I read a superhero comic out of DC, I'm looking how the pieces are put together as much as I am the story. Probably less so since I've been away from it for so long. But Marvel, in a lot of ways, still seems fresh. I was a Marvel kid. I grew up. My favorite comic was X-Men. Followed up by a lot of Spider-Man. And Hulk. Hulk was probably my favorite character. If anyone from Marvel was ever going to come my way and say, do a thing here or there, I can't. I won't get specific. I'm doing a tiny Marvel story that's just for kiddos, and I'm pretty sure I'm not allowed to talk about it specifically. It's not a big secret, but in so much I don't think they've announced that I'm doing it. But if I got to do a Marvel story that I write it. After many, many years. So yeah, I miss it. I miss that.
Yeah. Do you have any stories kind of squirreled away from Marvel characters in the same way that, and I know it was sort of in the moment with the Jason Todd thing, but that just kind of come to you and you kind of like write them down and maybe they're on a shelf somewhere for when Marvel comes calling?
I would say
not that
no,
you have to say
no
anything about them if you do have them.
Because the thing is that whereas no, it's almost like too big a field to even think about it. Like, and also all the characters have been around so long, and a lot of my contemporaries have written stories where it's like, yeah, I would have done something like that. That was better. Like, right. Yeah, no, Greg Pak totally covered that. I would have done something like that, and he did that, but he did it better than I possibly would. I think for me, I'll put it another way. There's conceptually, there's feelings in the spirit of a story, which might pop up in me, which is like, well, that could be a Spider-Man story, or I could kind of do it with my own characters with what I'm doing now, which is where I'm sort of at now, is that instead of seeing that as a Hulk story or a Doctor Strange story or an X-Men story, it's like, well, what's at the heart of it? Like, yeah, these couple of things happen. Like, I don't think I have there's this Wolverine story I got to tell. It's like, no, it's mostly like, what if this thing happens in this way? And I can kind of apply them to my own characters. And with my own characters, my own book series right now, I don't have any rules and I can do whatever I want. And so it's almost more freeing. So a lot of the superhero stuff you get in there is limiting, but at the same time, if someone came to me and said like, hey, would you like to do like a self-enclosed like Spider-Man story? It's like, yes. Like, do you have any ideas? Like, no, but give me a couple days. I'm sure it's right in there. I mean, a lot of it's about flip. A lot of it is sorry, I'm gonna make this analogy because it just occurred to me. A lot of it is like Luke closing himself out from the Force. I don't I don't think about the superhero comics. I'm not thinking about Marvel and DC anymore. I've kind of locked that away for a period of time because I'm focusing elsewhere. But there's some truth to it. I don't think I allow myself to actually even entertain it so much. That's the honest answer. I don't have those stories because I don't allow myself even to go there because I know it's not exactly going to happen. Yeah. When you're a kid, you get these flights of fancy, and when I'm getting creative and I'm thinking of things, I'm getting creative about I'm doing a book a year and I got a lot to do, and I love it. Sure. But I think that's where my creative thoughts go. That's a very long and artsy fartsy answer, but I apologize for it. But that's the truth.
No worries. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, and it also gives a great segue into your, magnum opus, can I even call it? But your ongoing, project, your kids comic project, which is Hilo. And I hate to make you sort of talk about something you've probably talked about a lot before, but I'd love to know sort of the origin story, not of Hilo, the story, but of how it came to you, and then how you kind of put a line in the sand with DC and like, okay, DC is done. I am doing Hilo. This is it. Like how did that come about?
It starts with DC Comics in the sense of this, that because it actually started with it sounds hokey, and I've told this story before, but it has the benefit of being true. About 10 years ago, when my son was 17 now, he's a big old teenager now. And I was writing Batman. I was writing lots of superhero comics. And he was 7 and getting himself a taste. Superheroes are beginning to creep into his, into his world a whole lot. And he said, "Dad, can I read some of your superhero comics? Can I read your Batman comics?" And he's 7. So I had to say, "No, you may not read my Batman comics." A lot of people getting shot, stabbed, beheadings. I had to explain to him, it's mostly for teenagers and grown-ups. It's a little too tough for you. It's a little bit too mature for you. There's a lot going on. So I gave him Jeff Smith's Bone, which is a rollicking, action adventure, and I think sort of satisfied his superhero itch. And he just loved it. He just crazy go nuts loved it. And with that, I let Jeff know. I know Jeff. Jeff Smith's been a buddy of mine for a long time. Along with these people I'm mentioning, like Matt Wagner and Bob Schreck, early on, I met Jeff Smith. So supportive, unbelievably supportive. He also got an early version of Pedro Me. And like when I got it to him, is before we got to know each other, he's like, "I don't want to read this." And he started reading, he goes like, and like, me and Vijay, his wife, like we started reading, like, this is good. And reached out to me, like, "Dude, that's really, really good." Like, we became fast friends. Anyway, so I reached out to Jeff. My son just went crazy, go nuts for Bone. And Jeff said, "Oh, dude, I love to hear that. Tell you what, I'm gonna send you something." And it's like, "What?" "I'm gonna mail you something. Just keep an eye on it. I'll mail you something." And he didn't mail us something. He sent us like 2 gigantic boxes full of Bone merchandise. He clearly just opened boxes and went around and kept throwing merch in, because he gave us the stuffed animals, the action figures, out-of-date calendars, posters, hats, T-shirts, like everything. And so it showed up here, and we opened it. My son went nuts, because it's everything. It's like, oh my God! It's like suddenly his room's like it's an immediate shrine to Bone. Right. And and not only was he reading the books all the time, like now he's got the Bone stuffed animals and the action figures and the posters and whatnot. And me, I got kind of jealous, because suddenly his whole world became about Bone. And I love Bone, but something about it in me is like, you know what? I'm a cartoonist. I should be able to do something that's kind of like Bone. I should be able to do that. And to be totally honest, I had a false start where I put together just a submission. It wasn't a story. I thought it'd be something I could sell quickly, and people liked it. They didn't love it, and I had to sit down and take stock. Like, what do I really want to do, and what does he really want to read? And it happened to be the same thing. It's like, well, I want to do a superhero story. I want to do about kids, the Barry Ween aspect of it. Like, I like writing about kids, and like he's a kid and he'll like it, and let me just think about that, and stealing bits of everything that I love. A little bit of E.T., a little bit of Superman, a little bit of Iron Giant, a lot of Doctor Who. And the story quickly came together. And exactly like Pedro Me, I just kept doing it till I got it. In this case, I knew how to write and draw stories already, but I knew my process will take a long time. And I just wrote and drew a 200 and some odd page graphic novel on spec. I just went and did it. Which I now know you don't have to do that. You can put together a submission, but I think it was helpful in a lot of ways. When I had finished the graphic novel, I was almost finished with the draft, not quite doing it. I'm loving it. I'm having a great time. In DC, this is sort of post New 52, and DC is it's still finding its feet with New 52, and it's rough over there. They're constantly asking everyone to rewrite stuff.
Right.
In many cases, myself included, justifiably so, because like we're not doing the same thing we always did. We need you to put more work in and thought and planning than you ever done before. And I was happy to do that. But I'd finished my run on Catwoman, and I was just at that point I was just writing Batwing, and it's the first time maybe ever I was just writing one title for DC. Like I think at least it always been like 2 books, and now it's just down to 1. And again, finding their feet. And so I finished my second arc on Batwing, And I think DC still wasn't happy with how it was all coming together. The sales were not great. It was, and so they want to. So I put in an outline for the next six issues, which I thought would give it a good turn. And they didn't like it, and they wanted me to redo it, like from scratch. And I was like, I don't know if my heart's in it. And I think my heart wasn't in it because my heart was elsewhere, like creatively. Like I'm having such a good time over here. And now they want me to dig in and figure out new Batwing. So I was literally sitting there with Pam. We're like both on our laptops on our couch. And I'm sitting there about to like have to rewrite this outline. I told her, like, they want me to rewrite this outline up to Batwing. And I think I don't want to do it. And I think I want to quit. And it's like, what? It's like, yeah. It's like, yeah. She said, okay, go ahead. It's like, no, you don't understand what I'm saying. Like, I'm trying to explain to her, over-explain it to her. Like, no, it's like, listen, I'm doing Hilo. She's like, I know you haven't been this happy in a really long time. You're deeply enjoying it. It's like, yeah. But I'm just saying that, like, I've got one paying gig in the world right now, and it's like doing Batwing, and I'm about to quit. And I'm, for the first time in 20 years or whatever it was, it's like, I'm not going to have like money coming in or anything. It's all going to be on spec. She said, you go ahead and do that. Like, okay. And again, it has a lot to do with having someone who has a lot of faith in you. But we had talked about it since, and she said, like, she wasn't particularly worried about Hilo. She said, like, no, she had read it. It's like, it's great. Someone's going to publish it. And most importantly, like, you're happy. Like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And I'd spent about 5 years just writing and not drawing. And I hadn't realized how much I'd missed it in a way that it was obvious when I started doing it again, like, including my wife had said, like, no, it's like you minus 60% misplaced anger. You're so much happier, so much more just in tune with who you are as a person. And it was actually, it took doing this series, like, yeah, I'm a cartoonist. I write and draw things. Even if I'm just writing something, I need to be doing this as well. These are the two things I have to be doing. Writing and drawing is who I am. And thank God, I sent the manuscript. I mean, my literary agent, Jody Reamer, sent it out. And we got a whole bunch of offers, thankfully. And we settled on this small independent publisher, Random House.
I hadn't heard of them until your book.
No, they're a comer. I think they got some game. They got a couple of books out there. They're doing all right. And here we are almost 10 years later. And I finished up my 10th Hilo book a couple of months back, and I'm working on number 11. And it's been great. I've been very, very fortunate that it does very, very well. And I get to keep making more. And Random House loves what I'm doing. So I get to keep making more, and I can be as inventive as I like. And it's cool. I think the only caveat they have is, like, you just got to keep making them. And I put myself on a schedule of doing one book a year, which is a lot, which means I'm pretty much doing it all the time. But I did my 10,000 hours writing superhero comics. So I can make up things quickly. Drawing takes a little bit longer, but it's fun. So it's
You're
good.
your own industry now.
A little bit. These are the good kind of problems
product has to keep coming. You anticipated one of my follow-up questions, which was about getting back into drawing after a decent amount of time where you were a solo writer. Was there any did you feel out of practice? Was there any sort of nervousness coming back to the drafting table?
Nervousness is the wrong word. I would say apprehension came in that, well, I talked about that. I did a submission before I started working on Hilo. And for me, that was like kind of the half-assed version of what I needed to do. And I had to put my full ass into it. And I knew if I put my full ass in, like, it's just going to be really labor intensive. It's going to take time. And after, I did an anime series for a number of years, and that took that was a lot of drawing involved there. And it felt like I was satisfied. But then I was doing a lot of development for TV. Some of it worked out, most of it didn't. And I was writing superhero comics. I'm just writing. And it wasn't until I sat down and started drawing again and thinking that, like, I think doing a graphic novel is going to take a long time. Like, it did. There's a process, doing an outline, writing a bunch of the script, then designing characters and actually drawing it and maybe redrawing it and figuring it out. And but I realized in the doing of it, like, yeah, it takes a long time. It's labor intensive, but I like it so much. and I'm happiest when I'm doing it. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's very much, you get to be a kid again. I make things up and then I draw them. That is my job. People pay me money for this. I live like a 10-year-old. When I was a kid, I would make things up and draw them while I half watch television. Now I'm 53 and I make things up and draw them while I half watch television. This is what it's no, the craziness of it is not lost on me. And the fun of this audience of kiddos. Kiddos are great.
Oh yeah.
Because they don't like it, they don't like it. But when they like it, they totally dig it. And when these kids get too old for the books, a whole bunch of new kids show up who are reading it again for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And they like it. There's the fanboys and fangirls who are 8, 9, and 10 years old are as fun as the best adult fans of superhero comics you could possibly imagine, except this stuff is mine. The way I would probably get excited about so you remember that story arc where Reed Richards doesn't want to kill Galactus and they put Reed on trial? Oh man, you remember that? Or just talking about the Phoenix Saga with a couple of geeks and you get really specific about it, or Batman Year One, or I can, a little verbal shorthand I have with Brad Meltzer is anytime we want to say 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven is from Dark Knight Returns, and it's when Batman is dressed up as a bag lady and arguing like it's $4.99. She's waving around a bottle of booze. It's cheaper at 7-Eleven. And so we say 7-Eleven and we crack each other up. Like having small children do this thing with my books, which is they quote stuff, they have their favorite scenes. It's just, I'll get choked up if I talk about it too much. It is everything you possibly want, and it never gets old. Hey, my favorite part is when Hilo screams hello, and he goes, I love that greeting. I do that all the time now to my mom and dad. I bet they like that when you yell at them. Yeah, they don't like it at all. I do it all the time. It's oh, okay, that's cool, man. It's fine. Yeah. That's the best.
Yeah, and you came along at a time when this kind of I hate to use business speak, but I will. This kind of market was sort of blowing up, right? I mean, you had this. What would you even call it? Kids graphic novels, I suppose.
Kids graphic novels, yes.
Graphic novel series are just they're huge. I mean, I have a daughter who's 9 years old, and she is just all into this, all into these books. I could not get her to even entertain reading a superhero comic book or a pamphlet of any kind. It's all this stuff, and and Hilo is an exemplary. Well, there it goes. I was going to say exemplary example. I don't think I can do that. But great.
Among friends. It's okay. It's okay.
An exemplary example of just stories, and your enthusiasm comes across on the page. I mean.
No, thanks.
It's just simply great. I wanted to ask about sort of planning for these, because as you said, you're doing like one a year. I think I read somewhere that when you originally, had one or two out there, that you envisioned this as sort of a 6-book series, and obviously it has grown beyond that. Is the story kind of unfolding in the way you envisioned it, or are you kind of, I don't know, improvising in some sort of way? I mean, I know you have to have an outline per book, but are you kind of like laying out the carpet as you're walking on it in some way, and that keeps things fresh for you?
Quick answer: no. I know an ending. It's like this. Very, very long. I'll try to tell as quickly as possible. When Random House first signed me up, my editor and now friend, still editor, Shana Corey, who's my editor, but now we're friends. Shana pitched it to me, asked me so how many books do you think you want in the series? I said, I think like 20, we'll do it like TV, like a monster a week, like a TV series. I got a lot of ideas, and there's this big mystery of like who Hilo is and where he comes from. We'll wrap it up in the 20th book. She goes, okay, 20 is a healthy number. That's a lot. He said, and that's good. If we want to do that, we'll totally do that. But I should point out that the Hilo mystery, I kind of want to get more into it a little bit faster. So it feels like kicking it down the road that far might be a lot. And also, I should point out that if you're going to do a book a year, if a 10-year-old is reading the first Hilo book, then, oh, they'll be 30 by the time I'm done. It's like, yeah, that'll be 20 years of books. Yeah, that's a lot. But if you want to do it, like, no, it's like, no, it's too much. It's like, you're right. Let me think about it. And so I sat down and like, I sort of kind of broke it out. Like, you know what? I will wrap this up in 6 books. I can do a 6, and again, superhero comics, your 10,000 hours, it forces you to break it down in outlines. Like, I'll do this, to this, to this, to this. Oh no. And this, that, and yeah, 6. No, 6. That feels right. Doesn't feel like I'm rushing. Feels like a natural ending. And that was gonna be it. And then after the first book came out, it did very well. Knock wood, touch wood, thank you. And my editor Shayna said, and like it's like everyone's really happy with it. And if you want to go more than 6 books, we could do that too. I was like, Shayna, you told me just to figure out a number. I said, so I did 6. She goes, well, yeah, but do they all die at the end? It's like, no. Like, okay, I'm sure you'll think of something. And that was it. They're sort of like hanging there like, okay. So the story definitely ends with 6, unless I think of something else. And again, comic books, as I was doing, it's like, this is turning to be more of a team book. It's really about these 3 characters. And at one point, one of the characters, Gina, we discovered she could do magic. And they're like, oh, you know what? After I do this story arc and I wrap up like the mystery that is Hilo, what if we focus on Gina and her doing magic for a little while? And I thought about that and like, yeah, that's like 3 books. And then I realized like I can keep breaking it out as like story arcs. Mm-hmm. As long as I have another story arc and I keep expanding this, it's like, oh, I'm doing a comic book series. I'm just doing a comic book series. And I just note for myself with each one that I have a bit of a definitive ending somewhere. And in this case, right now, I know I've got a very large ending that I can get to at certain points, and I'm sort of working the middle. I mean, a fun, happy accident was I finished the 10th book, which for folks who don't even follow my series, we take a break from our 3 main characters. We just focus on this one character who's this anthropomorphic magical cat named Polly. We go to her world. It's all anthropomorphic animals. It's funny and ridiculous and lots of action and crazy. And I had an idea about when we circle back and we bring our 3 main characters back into the story, that we do a quick little like recap of what they were doing while Polly was on this whole adventure on her planet. And then I started thinking about it as like the story, that what they were doing got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I realized like, oh, I can do a whole book of what they were doing while she was doing that. And I threw it to my editor. It's like, would it be okay if I do that? They're going to link up, but it was supposed to be this little mini adventure that they were on, but now it's like a whole book. She goes, oh no, it sounds like fun. Do that. And for me, it's the Zeppo. Did you ever watch Buffy? Were you a Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan?
I was not, unfortunately. But
yeah. For some of you,
go ahead. I was going to say it sounds like the series 52, where all the books fast forward.
Yes.
And then you're filling in with this whole year of stories.
It's a little bit, yeah.
Except it's not. There's not a time aspect to it. What you're describing is that there's actually just something in parallel. Yeah,
simultaneously. It's one of those. I'm trying to think of a TV equivalent. The Buffy the Vampire Slayer example was good because
just because I haven't heard Buffy. I mean,
I know
other people could be getting this reference totally. So,
folks playing at home, I'm talking about the episode The Zeppo, where instead of following Buffy and the gang, which we get just little snippets of what they are doing during the episode, we follow Xander, who is given some shit job, which takes him out of the main story. And he has an entire side adventure while they're doing the big thing. And then when we finish up, it comes full circle. Like, Xander, so are you doing? Are you okay? And it's like, yeah. And for what did he do? Like, he fought a monster, lost his virginity. Like, all this crap happened in the 44 minutes of his adventure while they were doing that. And so for me, they're like, this is the Zeppo, so that's what was going on with Hilo and DJ and Gina over here. And again, it's things like that. Like, I didn't think that was going to happen. Suddenly, like, oh, this will be fun. And this sort of like wasn't planned, but it's still part of the middle. and it keeps us on the trajectory of where I want to go. So I always know I'm in the boat and I know where land is. It's a matter of like sometimes how we navigate along the water.
And we're back, Mike. This interview was absolutely fantastic, and if we ever get the opportunity to have him back, I so hope that I'm be able to be a part of it. This was so interesting, and I don't want to sell him short. He's done so much beyond just Green Lantern. Like Mike said, Green Arrow, Batman, and the work he did prior to comics. Fantastic and so interesting. It's just great interview all around, Mike.
Well, thank you, Joe. And thank you to Judd. He really was generous with his time and went to all corners of his career with me. And, I just appreciate all the work he's done over the years. And he's now really in what I call his kind of third act now and doing just spectacular work with Hilo. So look for the next book in that series in 2024. But look up all the rest of his work and read it, and I think you'll love it as much as we did. So that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you very much for listening and viewing. Thank you for rating 5 stars, reviewing, and subscribing wherever you heard this. And we'll see you next time, Banditos. Peace.